I'm your host, Ed Parco, and along with Amy T. Meyer, the co-host today. And Amy, don't worry, we will get you on the video eventually. We're sorry, you're just so due.
That is all right. Welcome, everyone. And I am introducing my friend James, who is, like me, an Army veteran and doing some really great things around this area. And so we look forward to hearing some of his story.
James, how do you say your last name, since Amy didn't introduce you?
Yeah, day one of basic training was, your name is now Mars. It's said Marszalek.
It's said that way, Marszalek?
It's said that way, yeah, okay. But it's impossible to say or spell, so Mars it is.
There you go. Look, front and center now.
Nice.
No hiding now.
Yeah, that's right.
So I always ask this of Army people, why the Army? I'm just kidding. I ask everybody, why did you join the service that you joined?
Right. You know, it's definitely ironic because I initially was actually looking at the Air Force to go be a pilot. And at the tail end, you know, at 17 and 18, I really kind of landed on helicopters. And the Army has more helicopters. So that is the direction that I initially wanted to go in the Army. Didn't end up going that way anyway, but you know, I had a lot of Air Force people around me. I grew up and left for the military out of Spokane, which is a Fairchild Air Force Base market. And I had a lot of people around me that were saying, you're making a mistake by going to the Army. Air Force has a much better standard of living, better just everything. And they were right. But, you know, I had to call a lot of those people back afterwards and, you know, say, hey, you guys were onto something there. But, you know, the Army to me ultimately was, I wanted to do something that was more frontline. And that's actually what I ended up going to do, to be a scout and be in the recon portion of the military. And although the Air Force does have a lot of that stuff, it's a lot higher level, a lot of special ops type dudes that play in that space. And so I figured I'd have a little bit of a better chance going regular Army and playing around with the scouts.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people say, you know, but nobody makes rank faster than Army.
True. Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing how fast my son's in. He's been in like 2 years and almost 2 years, and it's like, you know, he's already, you know, E4. It took me almost 5 years in the Navy to get to E4, but that was back in different times. You know, we had less ships.
And that's the thing. They've changed how the points work, and you know, how you rank up has just evolved so many times. I hear a lot of people that get screwed by that because, like, well, the points are 1,200, and you know, I'm not even remotely close. So there's an ebb and flow in that space for sure. But you're right. The Army does categorically rank up a lot faster, which can be good and bad. You know, when I came in brand new, you know, I came in as an E3. And there were a lot of bottom of the barrel NCOs that I ran across real early in my Army career. And it's like, how the hell did you get a position of power? Like, you know, these were kind of garbage people and not very good leaders. They were after power. And it really came down to time. You know, the Army will eventually rank you up if you're there long enough.
Yeah.
And that's anyway.
Well, that's why they lose a lot of people who don't want to put up with the time and rank,
right?
And that someone above me can tell me what to do who's not smarter than me. They just been here longer, and that was my problem. So plus I used the Navy for what it was worth. I got my bachelor's and master's when I was in, so that's important that everybody uses that. You know, I'm just going back to the Army. My son joined the Army because they guaranteed what he was going to do. None of the other services would do that. So that was what I'm like. Then you're going, you know, whatever you want to do, we're here to support you.
Right.
All right. So, Amy, do you have any questions?
I did. So, when did you get out?
So I ETS'd officially had active duty service in 2012.
Very good.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a hard question.
Yeah,
those are really tough questions there, Amy. You work on that one for a while?
I did. So tell us about your transition story, because you transitioned out a lot more recent than we did.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I got out back when the Army was still using ACAP, which isn't even a thing anymore. And to be honest, I thought it was kind of a joke. I spent I think it was 8 months in ACAP total, and it was the biggest sham I've ever really seen. Like, it was the fakest detail you could go to.
What does that acronym stand for those of us who are not Army?
Like, shamming is just getting out of stuff, you know?
No, the ACAP or whatever.
ACAP. I don't even know what it stands for. I couldn't even tell you, but it's basically the Army's transition
out of the military
profile. Yeah, it's you're officially getting out. Like, you're going to go through this process to fill out a resume and learn how to get a job and figure out what in the civilian world relates to your military job, which, by the way, is pretty much next to nothing for combat guys. You know, you can do armed security or be a cop. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So, but transitioning for me, I mean, you know, going through the process, you know, again, it was just kind of checking the box, and just like PCSing to another duty station, you got to get your checks and balances from all the different departments, and of course go through, you know, turning your gear back in and all that kind of crap. But, you know, I came out with the purpose of, I wanted to take more control over the situation. I got out of the Army for a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones was I was tired of the bureaucratic tiers that you had to go through. Good ideas were not listened to unless you were at a certain level.
Right. Before we get into that future, I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
First of all, do you know a Ted Perry?
Yeah. That name sounds familiar.
Look on the screen. He says respect.
Oh, nice. That's what's up. Nice.
All right. So I just want to throw that up there. That's nice about that. That's what's nice about Facebook and YouTube and all that. We can do the comment.
Yeah.
So if you guys are out there, you have a comment, please put it in there so we know you're here, because we can't see you anymore because Facebook doesn't allow us, or on LinkedIn. All right. So while you were in, right, Amy got you to the transition story, but before then, how long were you in? Yeah.
So I enlisted in 2005.
Okay. So you were in about 7 years.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah.
So during that period of time, what did you do when you were in? Because you said infantry. What did you go to the sandbox? What did you do?
Yeah, so I was in 19 Delta. I was a scout. So it was a long range recon platoon out of Fort Wainwright, Alaska, which is ironic because we're training in the Arctic to go to the desert, which never made any sense to me. So I deployed with OAF 08 with 5-1 Cav. Spent some time northeast of Baghdad in FOB Caldwell, and most of my time in Cop Cobra. And then I was all over FOB Spiker, FOB Edge. We went to Baghdad a handful of times, and just in that general, you know, central east part of Iraq. Did that for 12 months and then came home. Did OSID at Knox in the very beginning. So 1 station unit training. Did 4 months there. So it's not basic and AIT. It's all rolled into one, same drill sergeant, same location.
And where was that at?
Knox in Kentucky.
Yeah, just in case people didn't know where that was, right?
Right, yeah.
Knoxville.
Right, Knox, yeah.
All those, we're going to be done with the show in like 10 minutes the way he talks. We're gonna
right.
Relax. We're here for a while. It's
right.
I like you go grab a beer and relax. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So that's what you did. And you decided to get out. All right. Looking back, and this is a question we always ask everybody, is there something you use today that you learned from the military?
Yeah. I'll say this with confidence. I don't believe in everything the military does. I think a lot of what they do is backwards. And, since I became an entrepreneur, really adopted a lean mentality and looked at lean principles and, really try and apply that wherever I can. The Army does a lot of stupid shit. And that drove me crazy. And so, when I was, anyway, I'll answer your question. I think there's a couple of things. Really, the 90-10 rule stuck with me pretty hard. So 90% preparation, 10% execution, really being thoughtful about due diligence and building muscle memory. So when it comes time to actually execute, you're not thinking about the mechanics. You're thinking about what's right in front of you in that moment. And so that, I think, stuck with me pretty hard. But I think overall, it's, when I really started to understand combat theory in general, things like the art of war and really how to maneuver in a space and how to really, have an edge over your enemy, taking that and applying that to business or just to life in general, I think really has benefited me quite a bit. And that is my general thesis as an entrepreneur is veterans, typically, especially combat veterans, are better at being entrepreneurs because we're looking through the lens of combat theory in general, or can, when it comes to how to be an entrepreneur. We're looking for unique advantages, and we're looking for flank opportunities and just opportunities to really gain advantage. And it's my opinion that business is really no different than war. The only difference is there's no bullets flying. I'm not being shot at every day like it was in Iraq. But the mechanics of it are really the same. You have an area of operation. You've got a set amount of resources. You've got good guys and bad guys, and you've got a mission. And so the elements that we had in combat are here in business and being an entrepreneur too. It's just the lens that you look at it through. So I think those are probably the two things that I really take from the most.
Wow. That's the first time anybody's brought it up that way.
Nice.
And that's a unique look at it because, you know, and the bullets could be the things people say about you, right?
Yeah,
I mean, because there's stuff that you can't fight through social media and other stuff that people come up with that you never have an idea what. And I did a earlier podcast. I was talking, and he goes, "I have no problem people not liking me or hating me, but it's got to be for something I did, not something that somebody made up about me." Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, nobody likes that, but we live in a stupid society where that's a very common thing. So it's like, you know, you're going to have to deal with it. And it is something that you can't touch. It's just something that's going to exist, right? There are going to be people who don't think logically. You know, we live in a world right now where nobody has an objective reality. Everybody lives, their world is what they see, and they're not looking outside of their world. And so we do live in that space where people are going to say and do things that don't make any sense, that are wrong, you know, and it is something that is hard to fight. You know, somebody goes and throws up a 1-star review on my Google page, and they were never even a client. They just don't like me or don't like the company or don't like whatever, you know. I've had that happen, and it's hard to fight.
You know, I had the same thing happen to me, but it had to do with the fact that we couldn't transfer an FHA appraisal because there was no value in it, right? It never was assigned to the thing. And
Right.
so this person who had no knowledge of that put on there, well, they were horrible to work with, blah, blah.
Yeah,
I didn't
right.
even work with you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You're my only 1-star out of all the other 5-star reviews, and I never did a loan for you. But you're going to run into that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's part of business. And that's what you're talking about, how to utilize certain things to fight off certain things. But it was funny when you brought up, and I don't want to get too far into this, but remember the old movie Demolition Man?
Oh yeah, totally.
Remember when they start in there and they thaw out Sty Stallone and they're doing that shit? I'm like, oh my God, are we in this society now?
For real. Well, and look, I say it a lot. I'm sure you've seen the movie Idiocracy, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because the writers for that movie came out years after it came out and said, guys, this was not supposed to be a documentary. This was supposed to be satire. And every day we're moving closer to this being more and more real. And it's like, you see what's being pushed on the news. You know, I follow a lot of Reddit threads too. So I just see a lot of conversations happening that are like, this really is becoming a documentary. Like, you know, I laughed. I actually tagged Terry Crews in a Facebook post a while back. And I'm like, hey man, if we're going to be closer and closer to Idiocracy, can we at least get you in as president? You know, that would be pretty awesome, you know, but
yeah.
You
know, this is a world we live in, and we just need to make a living and keep on ticking. So,
you know, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, bad things are going to happen. This is, again, back to the combat theory. You know, you can't control your environment around you to a certain extent. Some things you can, but most you can't. And so all you can do is react to those things and build systems and processes around the dumb shit that's going on, so you can keep it at a distance, right? And you know, you're not going to be able to control it all. But if you're thoughtful about things, then you can keep things at a distance. There's no question, but you need to be thoughtful about it.
Right.
Well, I think that's kind of where I volunteer, is because I feel like if I'm not subject to using the media's interpretation or narratives, because I have my own experiences, because I work with kids, because I do these different things. And so I don't have to rely on somebody else's version of how things are happening.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we, you know, when we work together, we do it better.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't sell papers or other stuff without having a skewed vision of a news or whatever. That's why they do what they do. They got it. And let's not get into that because we could be here forever.
Right.
The only thing I want to say, and it's the only time I quote Obama, is voting has consequences. So,
Yep.
and there's nothing wrong with Obama. I'm just saying, I don't always quote everybody. I'm just saying, make sure when you vote, you know what you read. I'm from California, right? We had a gas tax go through.
Right.
So how they got it through was you had to say yes to it. to get rid of it. What do people do? They read the title and they say no.
Yeah, right. Yep. A lot of games being played right now.
So that's in general. And I look back, Ronald Reagan, everybody, it's always been here. It's newer for us because it's us.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
All right. So you did your military, you got out. From what I read, you had what was your first business?
Yeah. So learned a lot of really hard lessons in the beginning. My first business was a cafe and retail tobacco shop. So basically a head shop and a cafe built into one, just 4 blocks outside of Eastern Washington University in Cheney, just out of Spokane. And it was wildly successful in the beginning, but getting there was hard. We were, Cheney it's got like 22,000 people total, and half of that is the college. And so we had planned our grand opening for the very first day of fall quarter to really maximize the revenue from the school year. And we were 4 months behind because of the TI build outs and problems that we ran into that were the general contractor messed up, and the SBA VA financing had issues, and there were just a lot of problems. And that set us back pretty heavy in the beginning. And then summer hit pretty quickly after that, and the college pretty much goes dark. And so we lost our primary demographic, and we just had a lot of problems. I still built something that had never been seen before. Our grand opening had 850 people that came through. We gave away 3 kegs worth of beer. We had live entertainment. It was kick-ass. But we ultimately ended up having to close the doors. And again, learned a lot of very valuable lessons that I think if I would have been a lot more particular about getting a good business mentor up front, I probably could have shaped a lot of those lessons without learning them the hard way.
Yeah, but it shapes you for the future.
100%. And look, I really do attribute to the success that I have now to learning those lessons the hard way. It was not fun. I never filed bankruptcy, but I did have to restart everything. I mean, I put every dime that I had from the Army that I had saved from, combat money and all the stuff. I was pretty thoughtful about how I invested and saved while I was active duty. And so I'm like, all right, well, I don't need a job. I can just go take this money and build something of my own. And I did that. And I believed in what I had built 100%, and just, sometimes you swing and miss. And that was one of those times. So it was very cool what I did. But yeah, ultimately didn't make it.
That's too bad. We jumped right into this. I forgot to ask you. All right, in your transition, when you were going through that, did they have you look at everything that happened to you, go through your medical record? Did you go through the disability and all that? Did you go through that process?
So during that time, and it's different now. I talk to guys who are transitioning now, and they're like, yeah, we can't even ETS without filling out our packets and submitting it to the VA and like having all that lined up ahead of time. It was the opposite when I got out. It was, you don't deal with your disability until you're out. And so I was stupid and lagged, and I didn't actually file the packet until about a year after until I ETS'd. And that set me back. And so I do not have the percentage that I probably should have today because my medical records were not as tight, because I didn't go to see the doctor when I had injuries. I, shook it off like a lot of guys did. And that was, I realize now in hindsight, that was pretty freaking stupid. And I encourage the crap out of everybody that I talk to. It's like, man, if you're getting ready to ETS, you better make sure that you're being seen, because that's what thgoing to look at. They're not going to give 2 shits about what you say is hurting. If there's not a paper record behind it and a doctor saying, yes, this is a thing, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah. Cause what did it say? Tuesday, last Thursday, we had a rep who does that for people, right?
Yeah.
After the fact. And they say, always go back through, even though it's been a few years later, always go back and have it relooked at again and again and again, just to see if you could up that anytime throughout the process.
Yeah, 100%. And the only, I've seen this happen only a select few times, but it is dangerous because you're reopening a negotiation with the federal government every time you do that. And so, yes, in most cases, you're going to get it bumped. In some cases, it goes back down. And that is a risk that you have to be willing to take. But again, if you've got the proper documentation, they can't say shit. They're just going to have to take it. And so having that documented all the way back as far as you can go, and as much documentation as possible, that's what solidifies your place in the percentage, no question.
Right, because I mean, a lot of guys getting out of boot camp, especially in the Army, I mean, they have hearing loss or ringing in their ears, any of that kind of stuff, and that's huge for going forward. But a lot of them, like, if I go and see the doctor, they're going to kick me out because so and so in the last group got kicked out, which didn't happen, but that's just the scuttlebutt they hear.
Right. Well, and there's also, I had a lot of leadership that really frowned upon taking time to go to medical. And I think that's just really representative of the combat arms piece of the military in general. Oh, you're not a tough guy. Like, what the hell? There's just a lot of fluff around that topic in general of going to medical in the first place. And I know it gets extreme. Like, this never happened to me, but like, I had other brothers who, their command actually really would harass and chastise them for trying to be seen by medical, even if the problem was serious. And so that, if that's the culture that unit has, then you're setting your soldiers up for failure. And again, when we talk about, good leadership, what makes good leadership, I think that's a really good red flag indicator for what is a toxic leadership. And I hate seeing it because you're talking about the rest of that soldier's life and some pretty big financial implications and healthcare implications for after they get out. Which is normally when you're thinking about it in the first place. When you're active, you're not really actively thinking about, oh, well, this is going to impact my percentage later on down the road. You're not in that mind state. But then you get out and realize that, oh, you can't go back. You can't go back and refill out that information. It's done. It's locked in tight and you're screwed.
Right. All right. So let's go. So during that period, I don't even know your whole situation, married, not married, children.
Single as shit and happy to be so.
All right. Just checking. All right, ladies, he's available. Or men, whoever it is. I don't care which side he's on.
Yeah, right.
All right. So now So, I mean, cause you've been out for about 11, I can't count today, but 9 years?
Feels about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and as that keeps going, then everything will get better. Everything looks better further out. I'm just going to tell you that because when I was in, I couldn't stand it. Then I look back on, it really wasn't that big of a deal. I had a great time.
People ask me all the time, like, hey, would you go back? And I say, look, if I were to go back, it certainly wouldn't be regular Army because there's too much, ridiculous bullshit going on at that level. But, during my deployment, we got to support 5th Group Special Forces and then one of their PSYOPs units as well, which was probably one of the most satisfying things I ever did in the military, other than shooting the 40 millimeter grenade launcher. But, if any of those guys, which they don't know my name, but had they ever called me and been like, hey, man, we need you for a mission, hands down, I would drop it all and go back right now. If I could go back and do my job and go fight the bad guys and be in combat, yes, I would do that in a heartbeat. But to go do CQ and work bullshit details and clean the motor pool, no, I'm not interested in that life anymore.
All right. So we went back and now we're coming back. All right. So we talked about your first business. What was the second business? And I only know this because you put it in your bio.
Yeah, sure. So the second business resulted from me closing the doors. There was a little bit of overlap because I tried to save the company. And so I'm in this, I have 18 employees. So I have to meet payroll. I've got overhead. We're making revenue, but it's slow because it's summer. And so I have a buddy of mine that comes back from Williston, North Dakota and says, hey, man, the oil fields out there are kicking. Guys are out there making 160 grand, working 6 months on, 6 months off. It's hard work. You're working 12-hour days, but man, you can kill it out there. And that light bulb went off and went, man, if I could at least just give my company some float, I could probably keep it alive. And so I hired a manager and got in my car. I had a little bit of prep work done. I did a little bit of research, but mostly I left in my car from Spokane, Washington to drive to Williston, North Dakota without a job and without a place to live. And I'm like, well, he's telling me that I could walk into a place and get something. So I'm going to figure it out. And so I drive down there. I get hooked up with a trucking company who's looking for drivers. They're hiring at a really good rate. I didn't have my CDL, but I had a military driver's license. And so I finagled my way into the North Dakota system without having to go through the school to get your CDL license by using my military license to get it, which is probably questionable, but because I had never even been in an actual commercial truck. Like I had driven a 5-ton plenty of times, and I had, you know, all these certifications that I had been through, but I had never driven an 18-speed truck. They gave it to me anyway. I took the written test and passed. I didn't have to do the drive test. And the first time I stepped into a semi truck was when I got hired. And they put me in the truck with a real veteran driver, not a military veteran, but somebody who had been driving truck for 25, 30 years. And I looked him straight in the face. And I said, hey, man, you're really not going to like this, but I've never driven one of these before. I'm going to need your help. And we had a lot of very interesting learning curves over the next 3 or 4 weeks, but I picked it up pretty quick. It's not as hard as people make it seem. But I was out there for probably 2 years, and I eventually, real shortly after that, I started my own company and started contracting with somebody else who had contracts with Halliburton and Suncoast and some other really big companies that are out there. I mean, billions and billions of dollars worth of hardware out there that are drilling under the ground, tapping into these oil wells. And basically, I just, I eventually started buying commercial trucks and trailers, hauled hazmat oil, dirty water from what was coming out of the holes after they had pumped all the chemicals down in the ground. And so we ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If the company man from the drill rig called us and said, we need you right now, you rolled out of bed and you went. And that was great. So we did that from about 2000, probably about 2000, early 2014 to late 2015. And right around June, July of 2015, OPEC, which is the Middle Eastern oil conglomerate, started price fixing because they're really threatened by the U.S. drilling oil. And we've got a metric shit ton of it here. And so they're threatened by that. And so when I got there, oil was trading at about $115 a barrel, which is pretty good. And when I left, it was trading at under $40 a barrel. And so the entire industry crashed in real time, probably over about 3 months. And everybody lost their contracts. To give, I think these drilling rigs are probably worth about 40 million a piece. And there were over 1,200 of them. Wow. And inside of 90 days, it went down to 11. So pretty big deal. The U.S. has the technology to cap their oil rigs, though. And so that's exactly what they did. Whereas Venezuela, who needs $90 a barrel just to break even, they don't have a choice. Once you tap a well in Venezuela, there's no stopping it. And so those guys were really screwed. And several other countries as well. But the U.S. only needed about $42 a barrel to break even because our tech is a little bit heavier. And so, but still, the entire oil field crashed in real time. And what really sucks for real estate investors is they had just spent billions building, because housing was a massive shortage there. All these, I mean, we're talking about Williston, North Dakota, man. There was nothing out there. We're talking ultra rural. And all of a sudden, we have hundreds of thousands of workers between truck drivers and drilling rig hands and just all these different types of seats that needed to be filled, and they had nowhere to live. I knew guys that were paying $1,800 to live on a couch. It was crazy. And so
that was your couch, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But all of a sudden, these real estate investors come out of nowhere and start throwing up these 10-story apartment complexes and hotels. And right about when it crashed in 2015, all these projects, there had to have been 25 or 30 massive projects going on that were all at like 60 or 75%. None of them are done yet. And then the whole thing crashes and everybody walked, right? I mean, Walmart was hiring at $18 an hour to start to be a freaking greeter, right? McDonald's was hiring at $18 an hour to be a burger flipper. Like, you just don't see that anywhere else. And so there is a trickle-down effect. I knew waitresses that were pulling in 6 figures because of tips. I mean, you're talking about a 99% male-dominated industry, and you're a chick. Like, you're probably going to get tipped pretty well.
Right.
What state was this in?
North Dakota. Yeah. So when everything crashed, though, I liquidated everything. And I'm like, all right, this is done now. It really wasn't worth it for me to stick around. And I think they're still recovering. Like, they're still not back to operating. We were doing a million barrels a day in just out of the Bakken oil fields. And they're drilling in Colorado and Texas, and there's some other spots, but the Bakken had the cleanest oil. Like it needed very little refining. So we would truck it basically from the drilling rigs off to a rail yard or, to a billion, gallon holding facility or something like that. So, but when everybody lost their contracts, it's like, well, everybody went back home. There was no more work to be had. And so I'm sitting here in a trailer park, trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I do next? And that's kind of when I really started to look at real estate real heavy, which I had always wanted to get into anyway. I had always been a real estate investor kind of on the side, flipping houses, and I had owned a couple of rental properties over the years. And so I had always kind of dabbled in that space, but I wanted to do it a lot more professionally and really kind of amp that up and just do it a lot more aggressively. And so I put a couple of cities on the map and said, all right, well, what would make the most sense to jump into the industry, looking at where are we at in the market cycles and what's going to make the most sense for a brand new agent and investor to kind of jump into. And Tacoma, Washington kept coming back as kind of a real heavy hitter as far as potential for growth. And I called it correctly. Like we've seen, average appreciation in a market is typically between 3 and 5% a year. And to the Tacoma area, or what I'll just call the Seattle metro market in general, has been a lot closer to 1% per month, which is insane. And so, and of course, we're at kind of the tip top of that right now. But
I want to add something real quick. Yeah. So the North Dakota thing, I had a bunch of clients who came from there. And the problem was when they lost their home, nobody was doing foreclosures, right? They waited. So this happened in 2015. Yep. They didn't do their foreclosures till like December of 2018, right? 3 or 4 years later. So now they can't go buy a house because the foreclosure that should have happened or their bankruptcy and everything didn't happen. So that trickled on for a lot of people who lived there for years because of the fact that there were just the court systems couldn't handle all the foreclosure processes and all that. So I totally understand. I know I want to get my voice in here somewhere. So all right. So you went to back home, not really back home, but you were originally from Washington, right?
I grew up there. I mean, I was born in Minnesota, but I only lived there for a couple of years. I consider Washington to be home for sure. I've been here for 22 years now.
Okay. And so you came back home where you went.
Home-ish,
and then So, and then you started your new company. Is that what happened? Or did you work as an agent for a while?
No, I started Operation Red Dot out the gate. I wanted to wrap my idea of being a real estate agent around a brand. Most people who come into real estate are John Doe real estate. They're trying to tie the brand to their name, which isn't necessarily a bad idea. But I didn't want first of all, my name is convoluted and hard to say and spell. And so that just wasn't really appealing to me at all anyway. But I wanted something that was going to be bigger than me, something that I could potentially take nationwide, which is really the path that we're on now. So I did start the company out the gate and kind of wrap myself around that company and really started to build the brand in the Joint Base Lewis McChord and Bangor Navy Base area, which is where I'm still at now.
Amy, anything? Does your grandson have anything?
He does. If you heard the noises that were coming out of him,
we heard him.
He's laughing, but I was going to say, so in this area, you also have a podcast.
I do.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. The podcast is a fun topic because, being in real estate and really being in sales in general, I have the opinion that nobody actually wants to be sold. That's why people don't like walking into used car sales shops, because they know they're going to be sold, right? Somebody's going to try and push them or pull them into a different direction. And I just believe that today's consumer is educated enough that they don't need to be sold on anything. They're going to know what they want. And so building attention for a brand is not an easy thing to do, right? Getting reputation out there and getting a brand out there is a little more meta than people think it is. And so when I think about creating content, I wanted to move away from selling stuff and just talk about stuff that was going to be relevant to the consumers or potential consumers in this area. So I created a brand that Operation Red Dot owns called the Puget Sound Underground. And it basically is just a good news network for things here in the Puget Sound. So we focus on businesses, good, feel good, happy stories that, people are just going to be interested by. And we do other fun things like top 30 countdowns of dumbest criminals and, the top 30 hikes in the Puget Sound type area, stuff like that. It isn't sales stuff. I never cross-referencing the brands. I'm not talking about real estate on the podcast. It's literally just to build audience attention. And what I'm doing with that is I'm building a network of people who are engaging with the brand through pixels. So this gets a little tech heavy in this conversation, but I'm ultimately building a database of people who are engaging with the Puget Sound Underground brand. And then when the time is right, I'm going to tell Facebook and YouTube, take that audience and start marketing all of these other things and these special programs that we've got once I've got an established trust with that audience, right? And what this really comes down to is the concept of Joe Rogan. Now, I've never met Joe Rogan. I've seen him perform live, but he doesn't know me. I don't know him personally, but I feel like I know Joe Rogan because I've watched countless hours of his podcast. And I feel like I understand Joe Rogan to a certain experience. Well, they've actually done psychological studies on that phenomenon. And it's why Joe Rogan can sell, workout supplements and jujitsu shit and all the stuff that Joe is involved in, because he has an established trust with his audience. And so the people who watch that show feel like they have a personal connection to Joe, even though they really don't. And so I'm mirroring that psychological phenomenon for my business. And so when I'm highlighting a restaurant or a hike or an event that's going on or a music concert or something else, I'm not selling anything. And I don't on the podcast either. It's not sponsored. I don't have products that I'm hawking. I'm not constantly asking people to smash the like and subscribe button like most YouTubers do. I just don't care. I want them to feel like they're getting valuable content from me without me having to sell anything, because the purpose of the podcast is to build trust in an audience that I can use later on to rebrand into other brands.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Joe Rogan, though, is he was able to bring a lot of his people from TV over to his podcast. So there's a little difference there. He had a huge following over here that he brought over the podcast. Right. And then when he got into the MMA stuff and bought that whole thing, there's a little different. Takes a little while to get to Joe Rogan status, but we'll get there someday.
And obviously, Joe, Joe had a lot of vertically integrated brands as well. He did Fear Factor. He does stand-up comedy, but he's been doing the podcast for over a decade now. So he was doing a lot of that side by side. And I agree with that theory too. I don't believe in just building a company. This is just me personally. I think there's a lot of right ways to do this. But for me, I believe in building conglomerates, vertically integrated companies that are all built to serve what I would call the master company. So for me, my master company is Operation Red Dot. We help veterans in active duty buy, sell, and rent to own real estate. But there's a lot of other things that we do that are separate companies. There's the property management company, which is a separate LLC that has a separate mission, but it's meant to support Operation Red Dot, but also go find other clients. I do the same thing with the capital management company for the hedge fund that we have. And there's just a lot of other vertically, integrated stuff that is all designed to feed into. So it's not just as simple as, I own a company and the company sells a product or service and we make revenue and we pay payroll. It's meant to be a lot more, back to the combat theory. Combat theory is not as simple as two armies that are facing each other and they're going to fight until one army is dead. Combat doesn't work like that anymore. And so when we really start to look at how combat theory could be used in business, it is used in that way where this isn't just I have a service to sell and you pay me for the service. It is a lot more deep than that. And I really like that strategy for a lot of different businesses that are out there.
And there was somebody, I forgot to show this. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
You know him? You know that person? All right. Well, now you got a new fan out there.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Go and like his podcast, subscribe. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Smash that like button, bro. Yeah, no, don't.
Well, no, and it's like,
but
yeah.
I don't care if you do or don't, right?
Right, but we don't, but it's nice to know, and it's people don't realize that, and I found this on the radio with, when the first time we started, we had so many people call in, and then the longer you on, the less people call in, because you pretty much answers their questions before they have to call in.
Yeah.
But it's nice for us to know that we're actually getting the word out that people want to know about. And the same thing with my radio show, maybe 5 minutes about the market, everything else about local community and everything else, right?
I want people to engage with me because they find value in what I'm giving them, right? And I think a lot of people are in the salesman mindset of, all right, I'm going to start this YouTube channel or this podcast, and I'm going to try and manipulate people to come in and interact with me. And I just don't like that theory. Like anytime that somebody, and there is a big difference between people who are starting a podcast because that's what they want to be a professional in, and that's where their income is coming from. Like they're paying their rent with that money, they're paying their gas with that money, their food with that money. I get that you have to build something quickly or you're not going to eat, right? And there's a difference between that and like, I don't need money from the podcast. I don't need to monetize it and sponsor and all that crap because I own a real estate company that is, we're pretty successful. We do tens of millions of dollars a year in sales. I don't need you to give me Patreon money. Like, I just don't need that. Now, what we use that for, though, when we do sponsor in the podcast or we do get Patreon money, we're giving back into our communities. We're not, we don't pay ourselves with that money. We're just giving it away. We're going and finding where is a need. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of need out there that I'm seeing, especially in the veteran circles, but just everywhere. Like there's a lot of people who need a hand. And if we can give that hand, then that's what we're going to do. So we do focus a lot of that excess cash on philanthropy and just really stepping in where we can.
Yeah, we see that need. That's why when we got together to start this Helping the Brave was just to be a hub for people to come to find out any information they want. Yeah, we tell transition stories and certain things, but we also talk about PTSD. We also talk about how to get your benefits done. How do you do this? How do you do that? Because we want people to understand there's a lot of that out there. And you just have to know where to go. And the problem is it's not as easy as people say it is. And they're talking about going to VA, and we had some PTSD guys on here have their own thing out of Houston. They're like, that's like the worst thing you can do. That's why we are here, because of the fact that I'm not trying to knock the VA. I don't know. I've never had to deal with them.
Look, go ahead. Here's my biggest argument here. First of all, I think veteran nonprofits for the most part are trying, but they're also just one slice of the pie. The problem is the issues aren't just one slice of the pie. And of course, I deal a lot with homeless veterans. So when a homeless veteran comes to me and I'm trying to help them get out of something, they don't just need a roof over their head. They need a lot more. And so I think the best veteran nonprofits are the ones that focus on holistically helping that person. It's about case management and helping them through that. And then, of course, it's also about the context. I have a categorical disagreement with the federal government giving the Veteran Crisis Line contract, which is worth tens of millions of dollars a year, by the way, to a civilian crisis call center. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, and I can't support it, in my opinion. And I'm just going to drop this real quick, but I want to take that contract over, and here's how I would run it. When you need help, you as a veteran, whether you served in combat or not, but you're dealing with a psychological crisis, you want to talk to somebody who's been where you've been. So here's my crisis line. You call the number. It asks you two simple questions. What branch did you serve in? And what theater of service did you serve in? Because the honest truth is, like my dad's a Vietnam vet. If I didn't know him and he called me in the crisis line, I'm not going to be able to build the bridge to that conversation the same way one of his Vietnam brothers could. I never served in the jungles of Vietnam. I wasn't even alive when it happened, right? So not only do we have a generational gap, but we have a theater gap. And same thing with the Navy versus Army. I've never been on a freaking boat, bro. I don't know. So, but it's like, I don't know what it's like to live that life. Right?
I understand. I totally get it.
So it's like, but now we can't bridge that gap in a much bigger way. I call the Veteran Crisis Line. I'm talking to a civilian. And I'm sorry, you can have the best intent in the world, but you as a civilian are never going to be able to bridge the gap of me as a combat veteran who had my best friend die in front of me in an actual firefight. You will never be able to understand what that was like to go through. You might understand the psychology of crisis, but you're never going to be able to bridge the gap. And so doing it in the way that I'm talking about is twofold, because there's a lot of people, me included, who have been through pretty heavy PTSD problems and were lucky enough to come out the other side. We still have a lot of our brothers and sisters taking their own life every single day. So this is a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So we now have the ability to take the people who made it through that process successfully and have built systems, healthy systems around how to deal with those problems that now are going to turn around and help the people behind them. So we get to employ veterans who want to help their brothers and sisters, but we also get to bridge the gap in a way that nobody else can. And by the way, because we would be a veteran-owned company, we are considered a disadvantaged class to the federal government, which means they are obligated by law to give us a certain percentage of government contracts on an annual basis, which doesn't guarantee we're going to get the contract, but like counting cards and blackjack, it gives us an edge, right? So I would like to see that government contract go to a veteran-owned company that only hires veterans to bridge that gap a lot faster. Because I don't know about you, but the Iraq War started in 2003, and I don't see the PTSD suicide numbers going down. Definitely not dramatically. And so whatever the government is doing to try and solve this problem, whatever the veteran nonprofits are doing to try and solve this problem isn't working at the speed that it needs to. So I think we need to do something a lot more dramatic to try and help this issue, right?
Right.
Every day that we have our own brothers and sisters taking their own lives should put a fire in us that we need to do something better. And to be honest, that's a big reason why I got into real estate, because I could go create this new product and sell widgets for $10 a piece, but I would need to sell a lot of freaking widgets to make an impact, to actually move that needle. But real estate's big, right? My average sale is 350,000 freaking bucks. So I have a lot more revenue coming in, which means I can make a much bigger impact. And that's exactly what we're trying to do out here, is position ourselves. Because again, this isn't a company, this is a conglomerate. And so I can now build in a veteran resource center that is holistic, that can do things like attack that contract and take that down. And so I think we as veterans are very uniquely positioned to solve this problem because we lived it, because we've been there. We wore the uniform, and now we're on the outside where we don't have the shackles of the bureaucratic bullshit that the military forces us through. And this comes back down to my theory of all good ideas that pass due diligence should be funded. And that's why I love being an entrepreneur, because I don't have to get approval from 15 different levels to do something that makes sense. I have a policy that says, here's our due diligence. If it passes this due diligence, fund it. And if it doesn't, then push it aside. But that really is where the lean mentality comes in. And a lot of this, I don't know if you've read Ray Dalio's book called Principles, but really a firm believer in a lot of the things that he says. And I do mirror a lot of that into Operation Red Dot. So anyway, we got a little bit off topic there. But.
That's okay. No, nothing wrong with a little heated conversation.
Right.
But you do need to get connected with the PTS people out of Houston that we had on. Probably. Huh? I'm sorry.
Is that the Camp Hope people, or is that something else?
Something else.
Oh, okay. All right.
Amy, mute. I can't hear.
Sorry.
Jeez.
Mute yourself, Amy.
Damn, yeah. Stop crying over there.
Seriously.
Jesus. Yeah, no, there. I'll get
you. Laughing, by the way. That was laughter.
Okay, well, it came across like crying, so
that's sad laughter.
Yeah. All right, let's finish this up here. All right, so we'll talk after we get off here. Don't go away, because we're gonna end this and we'll keep talking. But I'll get you connected, because I think that they deal with combat vets.
Yeah,
but they take any phone call. And they connect you to whoever you need. They only deal with males, right? But if you're a female, they'll take your call, they'll keep you on the line, and they'll get you connected with the right people. If you're nothing to do with the military, but you have a mental issue, they will get you connected with the right people. They won't hang up on you and call you and tell you to call back or call this number. They stay connected. And I think it's something that needs to grow. And I think that they would, so we'll talk about that afterwards. James, thank you so much for being on today and telling your story and I really appreciate it. I think there's some stuff we can do together, and we can talk about that afterwards.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's always a joy to get the story out there and just meet with other veterans, man. I think we all could benefit from really plugging into the ecosystem that does exist right underneath us right now. I'm always blown away at how strong the veteran ecosystem can be when people actually plug into it. It's pretty awesome.
And and that's why we started this, is we just want to be able to go, have a hub so people can go to. We want to do events. We want to do a bunch of stuff down the road so vets can get stuff there. There are some things, but people don't know that they're there. Yeah. And we need to get that word out. And that's why we started this.
I love it,
Amy, man. Anything last from your grandson? All right. Thanks everybody for watching today. We really appreciate it. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to say, if you're on the YouTube channel and if you like this, please subscribe, share, get more veterans involved. We are trying to help out here. We're trying to grow this so that we can help other vets tell their story, help them get through whatever that is. And we're here every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, if you're on the East Coast. And again, James and Amy, thank you so much for being here today, and everybody else who was watching. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.